If our approach is as a consultant, I make my life so much easier.
You can't tell them what to believe. You have to help them self-discover what to believe.
Hey, real estate agents, welcome back to the RMG Agent Podcast. I am your host, Reed Moore, and I'm excited today to continue our conversation that we started last week with Listen to Your Mom. We're talking about market of the moment. And as always, before we get into this podcast, I want you to know you can get last week's episode as well as all of our other episodes and blog content, webinars, and downloads off of rmgagentpodcast.com. And then, as always, you can reach out to us at rmgagentpodcast.com just to ask questions or give us feedback, any of those things. And as always, we love to get your feedback. Like, subscribe, give us a thumbs up on YouTube, all of the things. So thanks again for visiting us. We are going to talk today about Market of the Moment, episode 2. But before we do that, I just want to give you a quick refresher on last week's episode. We talked about how in real estate, there is always some market of the moment going on. And the reason there's some market of the moment going on is that we have all of these concentric circles and layers of concerns that buyers and sellers have, from the individual house to the neighborhood, to the area, to the county, to the city, to the state, to the nation, to the world. There are different layers of places of concern that people have. And concern can be another nice way of saying fear. So our job is to help hear people and to put those fears to rest. And what that looks like ultimately is that we want people to have what they know, they believe, and feel come into alignment by having a great conversation with us. And when what they know, what they believe, and what they feel comes into alignment, then they have a transformational experience that helps them move forward with their goals. So that's just to paint the context for today, and to help me take it even deeper down to the tactical side of how do we have these conversations, my co-host with a great face for a backwards hat, Jake Bartlett.
Thank you. I appreciate the backwards hat is kind of my thing. And if we both had it forward, I think it'd be a little weird. I am thrilled for this episode. I think it's going to be really great. We're going to get into some practical applications. And I also just got back from a really awesome conference where I got to hear, agents from all over the country and actually all over North America. And they were talking a lot about the things that we're going to go through and how they're dealing with the market of the moment. And a lot of it, and in fact, one of the words that was an overarching theme was curiosity. And so when I think of asking great questions, helping to understand what somebody's fear is, helping them to have that transformation, curiosity is how you're going to do that.
Yes.
So when you think of curiosity, where do you go with it?
So when I think of curiosity, the first thing I think about, the kind of when we were talking about this, the image popped in my mind of Bob Barker, right, who used to be the host of Price is Right. He was the guy I got to see when I was sick at home. I grew up in Montana. We got two stations on our little TV. We got 3 stations if it was a blizzard, so we got to add PBS in. But the one thing I count on is if I was sick in between soap operas, I would get to watch The Price is Right. And they played all kinds of great games, Plinko and all the other ones, but there was one called Punch a Bunch. And in Punch a Bunch, he had the contestants come up and they had a whole wall full of these numbered paper holes. And so the contestant would come up and they would punch however number they rolled, like how many, so they punched 3 or 4 holes, and then they got to pull out and see what's in the inside, right? And when I think about doing real estate sales without curiosity, I think about Punch a Bunch. It's, I get really excited because you express some interest in real estate. And so now I come in with my judgments, with my predisposition as to what you need in this current market. And now I kind of start punching holes, trying to find how do I deliver value for you. Well, the challenge is I start kind of eroding trust and eroding rapport right away. And I think that curiosity gives us a much cleaner, much easier way to be able to help somebody.
Yeah, so we really need to seek through our curiosity and questions to know this person and understand what their actual problem was. So could you imagine going to a doctor's office and having them, based on the way you walked in and your body language, decide what your actual problem is? we try to do that a lot as agents, right? Like we put these preconceived ideas of what the problems are into those conversations, opposed to really seeking to draw and understand the real problem.
Yeah. So before we start talking about, effective conversations or scripts or any of those things, I think that we just had to add this additional layer of framework. And that is, if our approach is as a consultant, I make my life so much easier. And the reason is a consultant comes in and they, instead of trying to guess what's going on, they ask questions until the person tells them what's going on, right? And ultimately, regardless of the market of the moment, because the market of the moment changes all the time, the underlying questions, fears, and motivations that buyers and sellers have, they don't change that much.
So, are we going to jump right into some of these?
I think kind of before we jump into to those, there's a couple of pieces of framework. One of the conversations that I learned to have with myself is that misdiagnosis leads to malpractice. And so if a real estate agent is listening to this right now, one of the critical important pieces of learning how to ask great questions and to be curious regardless of the market of the moment is that if I misdiagnose that person's issue, they're not going to die because we're not in the medical field, but the relationship could. That could be the death of the relationship because they walk away thinking this person isn't listening. And the interesting thing is, a lot of times my experience has been that people don't a lot of times they're just not in touch with their own motivation. And so the fact that they have an experience and they're like, man, this person isn't listening, it's not because they were trying to tell me and I wasn't listening. It was because they were trying to process and I wasn't helping them process. So I'll give you an example from today. A longtime past client of mine calls me and the person says, hey, I need to know if I need to sell my house, now, or if I need to wait till the summer when the weather's good. This house happens to be in a part of the country that's covered in snow. So I get on the phone with her and I just start asking her questions. And after about 5 or 6 questions, after about 6 or 7 minutes, what I find out is that their family needs the money from the sale of this second house, regardless of what the time of year is.
Right.
So the first 3 or 4 answers I got back from this person were all about maximizing it. Should I rent it? This and that and the other thing. And so I wasn't trying to say, no, you should sell your house because I need a sale. It was like, well, what does that do for you? Okay, does that solve this issue? What are the financial situations that you have right now? And just asking more and more questions to the point where that person finally just said, we think that the best solution is sell the house and here's our timeline for having to do it. Right? None of that. Now, the other way that I could approach that was that they just flat out asked me, should we sell our house now? Okay. The answer was yes.
Right.
But if I just go there, I'm going to miss all of the diagnosis, right? I have somebody that comes in, their arm's kind of dangling down. I think that's probably a broken arm. Well, I should probably check it out first, even if I'm that confident.
Yeah. Yeah, they could have the broken arm, but they also could have appendicitis or something else that's going on and they need both fixes, right?
Exactly. So we always, even when it seems like it's a slam dunk, especially if you're like, let's say you're broke right now, you're not making it happen. And now this teed up, beautiful opportunity presents itself to you. That's great. You still need to be a consultant. It's still critical that you start and stay in curiosity.
Yeah, I think there's moments in your career that you will remember, and there's a few times in my career, like the first time I told somebody it was better off for them to rent than for them to buy, right? Like they only planned on living here for a year. They didn't want to keep it as a rental. Like it was better for them to rent than to buy. And that was like kind of gut wrenching for me because I could use that check, but it would have been malpractice for me to put them into a house.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about markets of the moment, what are some of the things that come up?
Affordability with all-encompassing interest rates, payments have gone up.
Right.
Rental payments have gone up. Like affordability index is at 40-year lows, all of that stuff. Like, so what do we do, or how do we talk about this? Okay,
so first of all, and I always paint lots of context, and that is people can endure almost any how to get to a what. What I mean by that is when we're sitting down with somebody and we're looking at getting alignment with what they know, believe, and feel, we need to first figure out, is the goal that they want to achieve worth the pain, right? So for instance, let's just say, we're at the lake and you see, your kid fall in the lake and they can't swim. Okay. Do you take into account how many barriers and fences and boundaries there are between here and rescuing your kid? No, right? Like, will those barriers stop you? Well, maybe, right? But you don't take it into account because what you're looking through is all the way to the goal. And so when somebody is taken up by concern or fear, then that's when a lot of these things start showing up. And so our job is really to ask questions around affordability that are about helping discover, do they care about the end goal enough to jump the hurdles of affordability? It's going to cost you an extra $1,000 a month to own a house now. They're not going to say, I love that, but is that a hurdle worth jumping? For some people, the answer is yes. Some of the answer is no, right? If they look at the prices and they look at the affordability index and they look at the interest rates, what part of those things are things that they are going to use as deterrents for them getting to their goal? And what part of those things are genuine concerns that cause them to say, the goal is not worth me accomplishing right now?
Yeah, so I think the biggest one, right, is people say interest rates are too high as a way to stop the conversation. But if you follow that up with the question of what's more important to you, the payment or the interest rate, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be the payment, not the interest rate. So the interest rate isn't actually their first one. So now we've isolated interest rates away, and now we're talking about payment.
Right. Yeah. So it's going to be about payment. Sometimes it's about interest rate, and sometimes we run into the place of somebody says, well, it's the principle of the thing, right? And so now we have to isolate, well, what principle is that? Is there a principle that I never pay over 5.5% for anything, never have, never will? Like, there's going to be 1 out of 1,000 people that have that as a life principle. Right. For other people, it's a matter of actually going back to either affordability, which is the payment, or perceived value, right? They look back and they say, 3 years ago, I could have blank. Okay, well, that's irrelevant. And the issue is I can't just tell that person it's irrelevant, because that's not going to emotionally help them move forward towards whatever goal it is that they want. But helping them understand that we need to now frame this in light of what is it that they want, what do they want to achieve. That's how I need to go about it.
Yeah. So we're going back to that know, believe, feel. Like, you can't tell them what to believe. You have to help them discover what to believe.
Yeah, and there's a principle whenever we're doing consulting type work or consulting sales, and we call it 3 deep. And that is very frequently, maybe even all the time, when a question presents itself, that question's not really the question. The real question or the real issue is usually 3 deep. So the first conversation is houses are, the interest rates are too high. I say, okay, so tell me more about that. Well, interest rates are causing the price to be this. Okay, so is it interest rate or affordability? So that's question 2. Well, it's affordability. Okay, so question 3 is there a price that you're comfortable with that this would still be something that's good for you and your family? And the answer might be yes or no. Whatever. But now we're actually having the no kidding real conversation.
All right. Number 2, inventory.
Inventory. Okay. So inventory, just kind of as an issue or as a challenge, is an issue and a challenge that is not going to go away in a very, very long time.
Right.
And so the reaction that a consumer has with constricted inventory is without the perspective of what inventory would be if interest rates go back down, right? So we are in a housing shortage that has no quick, easy solution. And we happen to be at a period in time where some buyers are willing to step back and say, no, thank you, I don't want to pay that, which is causing inventory to stay at bay. And so the questions that I'm going to ask are questions to help them think through, what does it look like if interest rates come back down? What now becomes the competition that they have with other buyers for an even more limited inventory? So now it's just a perspective issue. Is, okay, you're not happy and comfortable with the inventory issue now. Fast forward 9 months, what's the issue? The issue is going to be this most likely will be harder, and there will be more constricted inventory, which means maybe you spend the next 5 years renting. You can do that. No problem. Is that something that actually benefits your family, right? So I'm working through all these emotions to bring that alignment.
So helping them to understand, if interest rates dropped from 6 to 4 tomorrow, would you want to buy something immediately?
The answer is yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So will everybody else.
That's exactly right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then the way we would do that is we would ask, what do you think happens to all the other people that are sitting on the sidelines? Like overnight, they all become your competition. What happens to the market? And I'm just going to ask questions. And again, I want them just to think through this stuff for themselves, because if they think through it for themselves, they're going to be able to work through their own fears and logic issues, as opposed to me telling them to, just do what I say.
Number 3, and this is one that we get, the loan process is a meat grinder.
Yes.
And some people will reflex choose not to do it.
Oh yeah, for sure. So going out and getting a loan, if you've done it as many times as I have, you actually end up getting all your stuff together and becomes fairly simple with really great lenders. But the vast majority of people don't have all their documents together all the time to be able to go out and do that. And so there's a fear of the unknown. There's a fear of rejection. There's a fear of somebody actually seeing your financial outlook. All of that stuff plays into this one thing. And my experience has been that a lot of times people need to hear a couple things. One is they need to have just permission that it's going to be okay, right? Number 2 is that millions of people every year actually go through this process. And so there's something about belonging to a herd of people who actually have accomplished something. That's helpful, right? So when somebody says, hey, that process is just hard and it's long and it's arduous, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask them questions that help them think about what are the goals, right? We've already talked about what is the reason they even need to approach this idea of getting a loan? Well, it's because this settles their family for the next 10 years or 15 years. And so the contrast might be something like, Jake, this process is going to be pretty invasive and pretty uncomfortable for about 30 to 45 days. And if we go through this process and we're successful, like the vast majority of people are, then we're going to be able to get you and your family settled into this house that you love for the next 15, 20, 30 years. And you look back and it's just going to be a blip on the radar, right? If there's something that comes up, it's going to come up early. And if there's an issue, we will know what the action plan is, so that way we can fix it and then come back and still accomplish your goals.
Yep. And I also come back to and ask, especially with somebody that's been renting that doesn't want to do this process, you ask them how often they move their rentals, or move from rental to rental to rental. Most people move every year to 2 from a rental. You go through a background check, you go through all sorts of things that are similar to the loan process on a smaller scale every 2 years. But if we can do this once, that's a little more invasive and stay there for 10 to 15 years, that'd be valuable, correct?
Yes. So that's bringing up the pain of what they're already experiencing, which is beautiful, right? I love it.
All right. This one's, I chuckle because it does not matter what market we're in. The market of the moment always has this unrealistic expectations from buyer, or seller, right?
Yes.
So how do you deal with this?
Okay, so one, market of the moment is always, all the time, everywhere.
Yeah.
And so are unrealistic expectations, right?
Yeah.
One of the best things I've learned about dealing with unrealistic expectations is the old axiom, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. When you're dealing with a market that has a buildup of unrealistic expectations like the market is currently, buyers and sellers both have a real buildup of unrealistic expectations. Doing a great consultation, teaching people how to think, showing them the market, going over the process, telling them what they need to know before their weird Uncle Eddie tells them, right? And plants that in their brain as being okay, is unbelievably valuable. It doesn't solve it completely, but people's expectations sometimes are rooted really deeply, and sometimes they're not. But if those things are not preemptively addressed, they sink in more deeply through the process because the process is so deeply emotional. So as soon as somebody has an unrealistic expectation and they're in the middle of a contract and they're feeling uprooted from their home and they're nervous and all this other stuff, that little unrealistic expectation becomes like this battleground that they're going to die on, right? So the very first thing is, if you know the unrealistic expectations that are going to show up out of the gate, have those conversations in a non-emotional environment where it's not attached to a specific house if it's a buyer, right? Or if it's a seller, it's not attached to a particular buyer, to where you can navigate how you guys are going to proceed with those expectations. Okay, so that's going to help. Now you have to actually deal with the unrealistic expectations that are still going to show up. And the unrealistic expectations are always best seen in light of what we learned to call a superordinate goal, right? So what ends up happening is people get really myopic when it comes to a real estate transaction. The agents and the buyer and seller can start really, really tuning in on something that's as small as a light bulb, and they absolutely fixate on it, right? And so what our job is as agents is to help everybody zoom out to the superordinate goal, which is always, this buyer wants to buy a house. This seller wants to sell a house. So fundamentally, we have the makings of a deal. Everybody has the makings of getting what they want, because this overall transaction is actually more important than that light bulb.
Yeah, when you get this situation where one party feels like they have to win.
Yes.
Right? Like, I don't care what their counter was. I have to counter them again because I have to win.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So you have all kinds of different things like that. And you have people who in the middle, they have a successful transaction. And now that it's successful, they start second guessing why it was successful, because maybe they were taken advantage of. There's all of those things that come up. So do what you can to preempt them. And then when you're actually dealing with them, you're going to have to work to get yourself and your client to zoom out and think about, okay, are we still actually doing the thing that we set out to do? If you kill the deal over this light bulb, does that cost you more in time, energy, and money than going to Home Depot, getting a light bulb, right, and having your goals met, right?
Yeah, you remember the meat grinder that we went through to get you under contract on this house?
Yes.
If we back out because of this light bulb, we're going right back into it.
Yes.
And based on the original conversation we had, you wanted to move because you need to be closer to the part of the town that you want to be in. Let's go ahead and figure out how we can negotiate this light bulb.
Yeah.
Or we can deal with this light bulb on our own at closing and get you moving towards that ultimate goal, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because I bring up a light bulb, not because it's so outrageous, but I actually, when I was a young agent, I had a deal that died over a GFCI outlet, right? It was a $14 outlet. And we got to the place to where the buyer was unwilling to let, I think I was representing the buyer. The buyer was unwilling to let me buy it and install it, or even pay to have it installed for the principal of the issue. The seller was unwilling to let his agent buy it or install it because of the principle of the issue. And I kid you not, like, they both just, they dug in their heels. I didn't have the skill to help my client undig his heels right at the time. And they killed the deal over it.
In a transaction, you have four parties, right? You can have four parties working towards the same common goal, like you said, a buyer looking to buy a house, seller looking to sell the house, agents helping to make this transaction work. Great, easy, everybody's happy, everybody, gets their goal at the end. You can close transactions where you have three parties and one person that's trying to sabotage or maybe not working in their own best interest. Those transactions are tough.
Yep.
And they close, but they're not smooth typically.
Right.
When you get two parties working towards sabotage, those transactions almost never work out.
Right. Right. So all of that is just context for this idea of unrealistic expectations, being able to navigate that and help people have perspective.
This one shows up in our market quite a bit. Seasonality.
Yes.
And it's not just winter season, right? Like in the Spokane area where we're at, summer slows down too, because we have a lot of lakes here.
Sure.
And people go visit lakes. They go on summer vacations. So winter and the middle of summer tend to be our seasonality that we deal with.
Yeah, so seasonality can actually be a no kidding reason that somebody doesn't do business in this moment. It really, no kidding, can be. However, it also is a great just way for somebody to kind of put hurdles up between them and their goals so they don't have to take that next step.
Yeah.
And if we think about seasonality, we have Christmas season, New Year's season, Super Bowl season, we have spring break season, we have beginning of summer season, we have boating season, we have back to school season, we have Thanksgiving. So the reality is like, if you take seasonality into account, there's like 3 weeks a year that are maybe optimal for buying or selling real estate. Okay. So what we want to do is actually isolate down what is the real issue with seasonality with this particular client. If somebody says, Jake, I don't want to sell my house over Christmas, the next question that I have is, hey, do you happen to host holidays at your house? And this is maybe the matriarch and the patriarch of the family. And they say, oh yeah, we do everything from Thanksgiving on. We have nothing but people coming and going from our house. We have 5 holiday parties and Christmas and everybody sleeps over and we throw a New Year's party. What should my next conversation be with this person?
Well, when do you not do that?
Yeah. It might be like, great. It sounds like maybe we should be getting your house prepared for us listing at the first of the year, right? Most of the time, the question you say like, hey, do you host holidays? And there's like, oh no, we actually go, we fly out to so-and-so and we go to other people's houses. Okay. Then now the Christmas season is actually really not a reason not to. So now we start exploring their motivation. If we can explore their motivation and find out what it is they want to achieve, now there's a good chance that they should be listing their house.
I find the one that I deal with that has this perpetual cycle that they continue to put walls up that you have to deal with is I don't want to move when my kids are in school and I want to move before school starts again, right? Like They just keep cramming this window shorter and shorter, and you basically have like a 2-month window between end of school and school starting. You have to do something, especially if they have to sell something, and it just creates these, we go back to those unrealistic expectations of being able to do that. And you have to help them understand that they may have to give slightly to be able to reach their ultimate goal, right?
Yeah, there is several hardships involved in buying and selling real estate. And so that's our job to go back and say, is the juice worth the squeeze?
Yeah.
And we can't answer that for them. What we can do is consult, ask them great questions, and help them come to those conclusions, and then provide supporting information.
And then last one, how do we find motivated buyers and sellers here?
Oh, okay. So this is the big one, especially actually, as it turns out, in high interest rate markets.
Yeah.
Right. In going into the Christmas season, we have this issue of, okay, how do we find motivated buyers and sellers? And I think there's a couple ways to think about this. I think the first thing is to know that manufacturing motivated buyers and sellers is not necessarily the best answer. So that means actually doing more work to find motivated buyers and sellers. And it really actually means talking to more people.
Yep.
Because they are out there. But if I ask the question, so Jake, how would you, what would you do to catch a fish if you went out to a lake and went fishing?
I would throw a line in the water.
Yeah, what would be on the end of that line?
A worm.
A worm. It would be some sort of thing that fish wants to eat.
Yes.
And so what I would say is, if we want to find motivated buyers and sellers, what buyers want is not a real estate agent. They want a house. Mm-hmm. What sellers want is not a real estate agent. They want somebody who wants to buy their house. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm having conversations with people with the right lures, which is I have conversations about specific and unique houses with buyers, I might say something like, I might send a text out to some people that are, kind of tire kicking and say, hey, this is the holiday season and people who are on the market are people who genuinely want to sell their houses. I know we haven't looked at houses in a while, but do you want to go take a look at 3 or 4? There's some interesting houses that just came on the market. Okay, So what I just did is I put a lure in and I'm going to find out, oh, hey, no, I'm actually not interested, or actually, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. So I'm going to go fishing with lures that make sense to the people that I want to connect with.
Yeah, so one of the ones I used quite a bit 2, 3, 4 years ago with buyers that had shell shock with the competition was statistically in Spokane, December prices were about 10% cheaper than June prices because people don't love to move in this area when there's snow on the ground.
Sure.
But if you're willing to overcome that, you can get a great deal.
Yes.
Right?
So if we just zoom out and we look at all of this and we look at having conversations that have to do with the market of the moment, I just like to go back to the principles, right? The principles are, identifying from last week's episode, identify where the issues are coming from. Is it from the national level, which would be interest rates? Is it coming from the area or from their actual house? Because maybe it's a distressed situation. So I want to identify that. I want to help them get alignment with what they know, believe, and feel, right? Because that creates that alignment that leads to a transformational conversation. And then from there, I want to be in curiosity, asking questions to help them identify what their goal is, because once they get emotionally connected to and deeply committed to their goal, all of the hurdles and all of the challenges, they will make up their mind to jump those hurdles and to go through those challenges because they see that the end is worth it.
Well, hopefully everybody, this had an impact on your career, empowered you to think differently, and ultimately encourages you that you can be curious in the market and navigate this current market of the moment and future markets of the moment. Yeah. We will be doing New Year, New Opportunity next, so stay tuned for that episode. And yeah, have a great day.
Take care, guys.